Hi everyone! Insert stupid joke here. This is episode 26 of Dr. Film's Psychedelic Mustache Review Emporium. I'm one of your hosts, Stephen Bennett.
And I am Courtney Bennett.
And today we're reviewing the film Rosewater, written and directed by Jon Stewart of The Daily Show. It's an adaptation of the book Then They Came For Me, which was written by Maziar Bahari, a journalist who was covering the Iranian elections in 2009. He was arrested by the government and held captive for 118 days. So, Rosewater, what was your first impression of this movie?
It's not typically the type of film that I would pick out for myself to go and see, but I saw the trailer and I thought the trailer looked kind of interesting. And after having seen it in theaters, I would say it was overall better than I expected. It was a good film.
Interestingly enough, comrade, you had mentioned that this is not the kind of movie you would typically see. And since this is your first episode on the show, give our viewers an idea of the kinds of movies you would like to go see normally.
I am very much the average American. I enjoy special effects and a lot of money put into a film with high-paid actors that are very well known. Those are typically my favorite films to go see, not necessarily the Oscar picks or the depressing films.
Yeah. That'll definitely be an interesting sort of perspective to bring to this show. Especially now that you're on the show now.
Yay!
Because I think most of the people who watch this show regularly know that Matt and myself do not particularly gravitate towards the blockbuster films. That's actually part of the reason I think we've taken so much time off, is just because the summer sucked.
It did.
But my first impression of the movie Rosewater was that it was good, but not necessarily great. And this is one of those movies that I went to hopeful that it would, blow me away. And it just didn't. It had a few shortcomings that just held it back from achieving its full potential. But we'll get into that. Let's first start out by talking about Jon Stewart's involvement with the film. I think that's probably how a lot of people heard about this one, is that Jon Stewart from The Daily Show wrote and directed it. It being from Jon Stewart, a man who's so out in the public. People know Jon Stewart and his opinions on politics and stuff like that. Did you see any of his influence in this film?
Yeah, I mean, the film is very, it's about a journalist going out into the community and filming a political debate that there's a lot of controversy over. So, you definitely get those overtones of Jon Stewart pretty in your face throughout the film.
It is in your face. And that's actually, I think, one of my problems with this movie, sort of in the same way that I had a problem with the film Noah, is that I thought that some of the messages were just driven home a little too strongly, where I personally would have preferred that they held back a little bit more than they did. And you can clearly see Jon Stewart talking about the importance of journalism, the importance of the elective process, where I think if he had pulled back a little bit, I would have been able to immerse myself a little bit more in the film.
I agree. I also think, though, that there, from a filmmaker's standpoint, could also be a very fine line. If you pull back too much, you could risk your messages not being seen by the general public, versus those who see it too much. So it's one of those, too much or potentially not at all if you don't have that fine line.
Well, I mean, I hope people would retain that information more if you did it in a more subtle way, or maybe if he had incorporated the meaning of those events into the story of the film. But as it stands, they were a little bit extraneous to the point that he was trying to make in the film. Now, I hate to do this, but I feel like it's kind of important around this time of year to start bringing up the Academy Awards. I hate to bring it up because I don't think that that's necessarily representative of the best films out there, but I know a lot of people sort of look at that as the movies to go see. And I think the big thing for this film would probably be the acting as a potential for the Academy Awards. Would you agree? Am I talking out of my ass?
As you so often do. I do think that was the intention. However, I don't believe that the acting in this film was Oscar worthy, to the point that we've seen in other films.
So in the film, Gael Garcia Bernal plays Maziar Bahari, the journalist who gets arrested in Iran. And he cries on camera, he laughs on camera. What else does an actor have to do to get an Oscar from you? Why do you hate Gael Bernal so much?
I do not hate him. I actually really enjoy his acting. But he just, I don't know if it was the writing of the film. I don't know if it was the screenplay, but there wasn't anything outstanding about it. I mean, I think that really lends to the entire, my view of the entire film in general. It was a good film, but it wasn't an impactful film, and it was good acting, and it wasn't impactful acting.
Yeah, the term I typically use on this show is functional acting.
Yeah,
it gets the point. It gets the point across. But I agree with you. I don't think that there was a moment in this movie that you say like, give that man an Academy Award.
I agree.
It was good acting, but I think, and you started to touch on this before, I think there's something missing from a script level that keeps the performances from really shining.
Absolutely. There were a lot of opportunities too, because a good portion of the film was him in captivity and being interrogated by his officer, the person that, you know, was interrogating him and torturing him. And there were so many missed opportunities for them to have an impactful moment, and they just didn't.
Yeah, this is probably my biggest problem with the film. And now moving away from, I guess, necessarily talking about the acting and moving to talking more about the story is like what you're talking about, that development of a character having a strong arc. And I wouldn't say that there's no arc in this movie, but it was a very shallow arc, if that makes sense. This is a film where the main character is a good guy. He has bad things happen to him, but he's a good guy. So he doesn't have really a central flaw that he has to overcome in himself. Instead, what ends up happening in this movie is he identifies a flaw in his captors and uses that against them. And I think that when you get right down to the core of this story, that's what keeps it from being a really emotionally impactful film, is that the main character doesn't learn an important lesson about himself. So I think we've basically covered all the big aspects of this film. That typically brings us to love-hate. What did you love about the film Rosewater? What did you hate about it?
What I loved about the film were the moments that Gael Garcia Bernal had in solitary confinement. There are a few moments that he has where he interacts with his father and his sister, which are really interesting. His father and his sister have both passed away at this point while he's in solitary confinement, but they have both experienced being imprisoned and held captive as well. So when he's in solitary confinement, he talks to them, he seeks advice, they interact with him, and those are some of the most impactful moments that he has in this film. What I didn't like so much about the film was that there was just something lacking. It didn't feel impactful. It didn't feel like this important story about this person in a tragic situation felt that tragic, felt that impactful. It was a good film, it wasn't a very impactful film. What did you think about it, Steve? What did you love and hate?
What I loved about Rosewater was one particular scene towards the end of the film when Bernal comes to the realization that his captors have done everything that they possibly can to him and they still haven't broken him. It's funny, it's sad, it's moving, it's impactful. It's all of those things that I wish the rest of the film was just condensed into one scene. And that brings me to my hate. What I hated about this movie is that Jon Stewart's message was just a little bit too much in my face. It pulled me out of the film. I would have appreciated if Jon Stewart had left the message in the back seat, let me kind of come to those realizations on myself, and just let me enjoy the story that he's telling me. So that's my love-hate, and that brings us to Volkswagen buses. How many Volkswagen buses out of 10 are you gonna give Rosewater?
I'm gonna give Rosewater 6 Volkswagen buses out of 10. I thought it was a really good film, but it wasn't a great film. I thought there was really good acting, but there wasn't great acting. I thought it was a good screenplay, but it wasn't a great screenplay. So overall, it was a good film, and I would encourage people to see it, but it wasn't the most impactful film I've seen.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% with those points that you're making, which is why I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. It was just missing that one piece that kept it from being an 8, a 9, or a 10 in my book, and instead it's just stuck at that 7 mark. Should people go see this one in the theater?
I don't think this film is necessary to go see in the theater. It's the type of film that, for me, I would probably prefer watching at home, curled up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn. The movies I like to enjoy seeing in the theater are the ones that are the big blockbuster films with a lot of noise and a lot of people, so.
I would disagree with you on that. I would say go see this one in the theater, primarily to support the filmmaker in this type of filmmaking. It was made by Jon Stewart, a man I respect very highly, and I know he poured his heart and soul into this story. It's something he cared a lot about. So please do go see this one in the theater, and make sure your dollar goes where it matters. Is that it? Did we get everything in?
I think so.
Okay, that's going to do it for this episode of Dr. Film's Psychedelic Mustache Review Emporium. Till next time, take care.
Drive hammered, get nailed.
Bye.